Hi students, it's Miss Renee here. I'm going to summarize the key points of last week's lesson. And it seems that the group activity has been particularly challenging because looking at the PowerPoint slides that most of the groups have prepared, it seems that the terms in the tables are not well understood. And I'm going to explain that in depth in this video. So make sure you watched it. So now I'd like to explain about attainment of goals. And under the attainment of goals, there are three criteria that has to be met, or rather objectives that each healthcare system of any country would like to achieve. So under this attainment of goals, the first one is health. So health represented by the disability adjusted life expectancy. What it means is that quality of life means the person can live very long and at the same time free from any disability, and that the person can truly enjoy life. Okay, not just about living long, but living healthily as well. Second is the responsiveness, right? So is the healthcare system responsive to the particular patient? What it means is that is the waiting time long or reasonable? And at the same time, does the patient feel respected? And this is under responsiveness. And the third, fairness in financial contribution, right? So usually it would be more for those who are not very well to do. Do they feel that it is fair for them to access the healthcare system? And do they think that even if they do not have any money or they are not working because of a disability, can they still access the health system? If the answer is yes, then it means that it is fair. So these three criteria will contribute to the overall goal attainment, goals which all healthcare systems strive to achieve. Okay, and I would like to use the word which is effectiveness to describe about attainment of goals. So effectiveness here means that the health system of any country is trying to do the right thing. Again, trying to do the right thing. And what is the right thing here? People having good health and healthy, is responsive to the people, and the people felt that it is fair system. Okay? And now let me move on to the performance. So under the performance, it is about efficiency. Okay? So let me write that down. Efficiency. Efficiency and effectiveness, they are not the same. Remember earlier on I said that effectiveness is doing the right thing, and the right thing here refers to these 1, 2, and 3. Efficiency here refers to how fast that particular thing can be done or is relative to the resources. Alright, so for here, do they spend a lot of money on healthcare in order to allow the people to live longer? So if let's say they spend a lot of money so that people can live longer, what do you think? Are they efficient or they're not efficient? Well, obviously they're not so efficient. Means that the performance is not so good. Alright? So efficiency here means that they spend very little money and at the same time people are living longer. Okay? And this living longer refers to on the level of health. Alright? So are you clear now? Or maybe I'll give you another analogy. Alright, so for instance, a student A spent about 1 hour to complete the group activity. But from the group activity, it seems that the student does not have any good idea of what this table about. So is this student performing or not performing? Well, obviously this student is not performing, and this student is very efficient, completing it with the least amount of time but not doing it right. Okay, and whereas for a person who is effective may spend a long time completing the group activity, and at the same time if the person is effective enough, then chances are the person is able to demonstrate sound understanding of the group activity and resulting making very good observations of the table here. So effectiveness is very important. Alright, doing the right thing, but at the same time you would like to balance it off by not spending excessive resources just to do the right thing. So there's a balance that we need to strike, because ultimately resources is the finite resources, especially when it comes to money. So now I'd like to compare these 4 countries of this table, and these 4 countries are highlighted in yellow here. Well, why all these 4 countries? The reason is because you have watched the video on France and Japan. Alright, and Singapore is a country where you live in, and USA, well, the data of this country has been discussed quite intensively in the slides. So therefore, these 4 countries, to make you appreciate these WHO criteria in terms of measuring the attainment of goals, which is effectiveness, and performance, which is efficiency. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, I'd like to talk about the health expenditure per capita in international dollars. So health expenditure per capita, it means that how much does the government spend on for each person in the country. Alright, so that's what it means by health expenditure per capita in international dollars. Right, now the number for this column, is it the higher it is, the better. Think about it, this is health expenditure. Alright, well, the higher it is, it means that they spend a lot of money. So the higher it is means it's not so good. They spend a lot to achieve this level of health. Alright, let's look at France. In comparison to US, alright, they spend not as much as compared to US, and at the same time they achieve a pretty good health. And that's precisely how they get very high, or rather the top ranking, number 1, in terms of their performance. Okay, so again, remember, efficiency is relative to resources, and the resources here refers to the money. Okay, money. Alright, and what about Singapore? Singapore seems that don't spend so much money on the healthcare, alright, per person, and at the same time they're not too bad. They don't spend so much, and yet the people are relatively healthy. And what about Japan? Well, Japan spend more than Singapore, right? And the people are living pretty healthy. But if you look at the difference here, there's not a lot of difference, isn't it? But in terms of spending, there's a lot of difference, isn't it? So now compare Singapore with the US, all right? And this is what it is discussed in the slides. So Singapore spend very little money as compared to US, and people in Singapore are living longer than in the US. So it shows that Singapore is very efficient compared to US. Alright, and also from the video, many of you mentioned that Singapore should learn from France and Japan. Reason because the people are living very long, and at the same time they also do provide free healthcare to a certain extent. Alright, but like I mentioned, the resources are not finite, especially in Singapore. We have no resources, we have no oil, no water. Okay, so we can't be like France and Japan. Alright, so we need to also have to inculcate personal responsibility, especially when it comes to healthcare. Alright, we can't just spend, spend, and spend. And precisely because of that, that explains why our number is 38. Okay, which means that if you compare with France, Japan, and with US, Singapore spend the least. Alright, we spend the least in terms of health expenditure, right? But we're not doing too bad in terms of a level of health. People do live relatively long as well. Okay, so in conclusion, for the health expenditure per capita, the higher the ranking, which is US, means that they spend a lot, alright, and at the same time they are not achieving much. Okay, so this is what you need to note. Alright, because most students misunderstood this column, thinking that this is the best, where else it can be the best if the people are living long, which is if they get number 1 here, but it is not. They are spending the most, and the people are not relatively healthier as compared to Japan, Singapore, and France. Okay, now let me move on to the attainment of goal. Okay, comparison for the attainment of goal. Well, the attainment of goal, Japan is number 1. Wow. And some of you mentioned in your slides that because of their diet that the Japanese are taking, and therefore the people there are living very long, and at the same time they can live without disability as well. And precisely because of this goal, and at the same time the goal is very responsive, people don't have to wait very long to the doctor, and felt very much respected by the health professionals. And at the same time they felt that it is pretty fair living in a country, enjoying the healthcare that is being provided, and leads them to having number 1, right, in terms of goal attainment. Whereas for Singapore, ours is number 27, right? Largely it's because the people are not very happy, especially in terms of fairness of financial contribution. And some of you recognize that this data, it is dated in the year 2000. So that has been many years past until today. And of course, our government has made a lot of improvement in terms of making the healthcare system fairer. And some of you mentioned about CHAS, MediShield Life, and also Pioneer Generation. So all these will help to reduce the gap that is being felt by those who are richer and those who are poorer in terms of receiving the healthcare. Okay, so that's good observation that some of you are able to make. And USA here, okay, is ranked number 1 in terms of responsiveness. So, well, you can observe that the healthcare is responsive to them because they pay a lot of money. So this is something that you can make an inference from. And in terms of the level of health, they are responsive, but the level of health is number 24. And it's pretty close to Singapore actually, all right? But overall, their ranking it's 15, so still better than Singapore. But now, well, so many years later, well, maybe more than 18 years later, perhaps we are on par with them, or maybe we are doing better than them, all right? So from here, I hope that you have gotten a reasonable understanding of the difference between attainment of goals and performance, and able to see how each country are faring differently in different aspects, and which country actually did the best. So here, France is number 1. They spend little and they achieve a lot. All right. However, the one who is able to achieve the goal far better is Japan. And Singapore, it's number 6 in terms of performance, and 27 for the overall goal attainment.